would like to ask Congress to take action to ensure that workers and families do not continue to be the victims of these private equity firms who do not care if workers are pushed to the limits as long as they're receiving the highest return on investment possible.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Our sisters and brothers in Brookwood barrel towards 1 year on strike. They're 6 weeks away from 1 year on strike now. Still, crickets from the media in Alabama, especially conservative media. Crickets from all but a few politicians, like Tuscaloosa Representative Chris England. He's one of the only people who have consistently supported these striking miners. They're on strike because of unfair labor practices, a failure to bargain by the company in good faith, a loss of health care, retirement, and $6 an hour. $6 an hour. In the absence of support from Alabama politicians, independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, held a hearing in the U.S. Senate's Budget Committee on what corporate raiders are doing to workers and consumers. We're going to play the testimony from the hearing from Cecil Roberts, international president of the UMWA, and Braxton Wright, one of the Alabama miners, in full, since the context is important, and unfortunately, if you get your news from conservative talkers, you won't know anything at all about what's going on, unfortunately. And it's amazing. The longest strike in Alabama history, and people who are on the radio for 3 to 5 hours a day can't find the time to talk about it. I mean, that's insane. Can't find the time to advocate on behalf of working Alabamians. Amazing to me. But so, like I said, we're going to play those testimonies in full. First up, here is President Roberts.
Cecil Roberts, the international president of the United Mine Workers of America. Mr. Roberts, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Senator, for scheduling this hearing and inviting us to participate. We appreciate the willingness to hear from workers here today. I want to thank Ranking Member Braun also for allowing us to be here today, and the panelists here, the senators here on this committee. My good friend Senator Kane is here, and this is an opportunity that workers do not always have to have their voice heard here on Capitol Hill. Today is the 323rd day of our strike in Alabama. I would like to take this opportunity to invite Senator Tuberville to stop by at his convenience, and maybe he could be of some help with respect to encouraging where you're met to join with the United Mine Workers and fashion an agreement to end this strike. 323 days, but this didn't start 323 days ago. I think it would be fair to say that not a single coal miner ever caused a bankruptcy. No one ever asked the shuttle car operator, do you want us to invest some money here or there? They don't ask the continuous miner that. They don't ask the longwall operator that. All these decisions that lead to bankruptcy are made by others than the coal miners. In 2015, there was a bankruptcy filing by Walter Energy, and that hearing for that bankruptcy took place in Alabama. The first thing that happened in this bankruptcy is something that's been alluded to here by both you and Senator Warren. Retirees, 2,700 of them, sitting at home, 75, 85 years old, giving their lives to this industry, get a notice. Well, the bankruptcy judge decided you don't have health care. The second thing that happens is the pension plan goes away. The next thing that happens is that the collective bargaining agreement that was ratified by an overwhelming majority of these workers that was in place at the time is terminated. The next thing that happens is what? Most people don't know this. You don't have a job here anymore. So theoretically, not theoretically, in reality, people get discharged in bankruptcy court. Now, who decided that that was going to happen? How did that come about? At the time, these investors from New York, mainly, were playing a role already with respect to what was going on in the bankruptcy court. So now, workers who had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with this filing of this bankruptcy or creating this bankruptcy are now being told, well, you've got to fix this. The workers have to fix this. How in the world is that going to take place? First thing that happens is we are told by this private equity group, well, we don't have to hire a single one of your members back. They're unemployed as far as we're concerned. Now, if you want to get your members back to work, you have to deal with us and reach an understanding with us. And if that understanding is something we want, then there'll be an opportunity for your members who've got 40 years in this coal mine, 30 years, 20 years, been there forever, producing coal for this company that was there previously. Now they're telling us, you don't have any leverage. You know what? They're right. That's the truth. Can you imagine trying to bargain with somebody that's taking the coal mines over, who came here from New York and don't even know what color the coal is, don't have any idea what happens in a coal mine, but they're telling us we're not hiring those people back unless you do certain things, and they've already gotten everything that you could ever ask for as an investor or an employer out of the bankruptcy court. You've canceled health care for retirees. You've terminated the contract. You've now terminated the employees unless your union bargains their way back in. So now the union's at the bargaining table with this group. And we do reach an agreement. It was a terrible agreement. But the workers were told the truth. If we don't reach an agreement with this group, they don't have to hire us. We won't be here to represent you, and who knows what's going to happen to this place. No entity should have that kind of power delegated to them by the laws that are passed here in this location that we're sitting now. That's the law. Bankruptcy laws are horrendous for working class people. There's been 60-some of these in the coal fields of Appalachia. No group of workers should be treated. And let me tell you what's happened since that contract was ratified. It's been 5+ years. Senator Tuberville said how much money they make. You know, you go in the mines and spend 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. These workers are totally exhausted and they're totally fed up. About the contract that was voted on, the one thing that this committee should know, it failed 95-5. These other agreements he's talking about are the same agreement. They changed this word. They changed that word. New proposal. That's what we've been faced with for about a year now. I think it's disgraceful that these workers have been on strike this long of a time. And you're going to hear momentarily from Braxton Wright, who's been on this picket line daily. And he's one of the leaders of our union on that level. His wife, Hayden, has headed up our auxiliary. But there are 800 of these families that's not only suffered through this strike, but they have suffered for 5+ years because of what happened to them when these investors rolled into town and couldn't spell coal, couldn't tell you what color it is. All they knew is there's some money to be made here, and they're gone now. They're gone now. And now we're tasked for how we keep this company profitable. The coal is selling, by the way, for about $500 a ton. This is metallurgical coal. You would have to work at it to make money with respect to the price of coal being at that level. With that, I yield, Mr. Chairman.
You just heard President Cecil Roberts. He is the international president of the United Mine Workers of America, speaking on Thursday at the U.S. Senate's Budget Committee hearing on what corporate raiders are doing to workers and consumers in America. He spoke at the invitation of independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, and now on the next on the panel, Alabama coal miner Braxton Wright.
Our next panelist is Braxton Wright, who's a mine employee at Warrior Met and a member of UMWA Local 2368. He has worked at the Brookfield mine for 17 years. He has been on strike since April 1st, 2021. Mr. Wright, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Braun, distinguished members of the committee, my name is Braxton Wright. I've worked at the mines in Brookwood, Alabama for over 17 years. I come from a family of coal miners. My grandfather was injured in a mining accident at Black Diamond Mines in West Blockton and later passed away to his injuries. My father worked in the coal mines a short time. My father-in-law is a retired UMWA miner who retired at the time of the Walter Energy bankruptcy with more than 30 years. Today, I would like to speak with you about how private equity firms such as Apollo, Blackstone, and other private equity who held stock in Walter Energy dictated the terms and conditions of the 2016 takeover of Walter Energy, which was renamed Warrior Met Coal, and what that means to workers, families, and communities. These private equity investors bear much of the responsibility for the cuts in pay and benefits and have led to the United Mine Workers' unfair labor practice strike at Warrior Met. The past 5 years working under this bankruptcy contract has been difficult for the miners and their families. These private equity groups have played a role in the exploitation of UMWA miners as well as numerous other workers who do not have the benefit of a union contract. Due to the Chapter 11 bankruptcy filed by Walter Energy in 2016, miners took massive concessions in order to make the company profitable again. Some of these concessions included a $6 an hour pay cut depending on your pay grade. It by itself placed a huge strain on workers and their families. When you are required to work 12 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, if you're lucky to see your spouse or children more than a few hours a day. Before the bankruptcy, many of the spouses didn't have to have a second job or didn't have to work. After the bankruptcy, many spouses were forced to work outside the home while still being primary caregiver. So the children saw both parents less as a result of the cuts in the bankruptcy contract. It would break your heart to hear how many times my oldest daughter, Avery, would ask me, "Why wasn't you at my game? Why didn't you come to my field trip or awards day at school? Why can't you go with us to the park?" Every time I had to answer, I had to work or I had to sleep. Knowing that my child deserved to have time with both parents, these have been the voices of hundreds of children's that's parents work at, Warrior Met Coal. While Warrior Met claims to give us 8 holidays, in actuality, they only dedicated 3 holidays spent with our families: Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day. The push to increase production and profits for investors at the expense of the workers is amplified more with a 4 strike policy implemented in 2016. All absences, late arrivals, or early outs result in a strike. On the 4th occurrence, you would be fired. This policy was a huge source of stress and worry for families. If you arrived a few minutes late, you were still required to work, but you still received a strike. If you were involved in an accident, medical emergency, your child was sick or hospitalized, your spouse was in labor or hospitalized, it didn't matter. If you could not give a 24-hour notice, you would receive a strike. My brothers and sisters have been given strikes for having accidents on their way to work and being late. Our spouses learned not to call and tell us about accidents or emergencies until after we were done with our shift, out of fear of us receiving a strike. So when my own daughter was in the hospital and I was working 12-hour overnight shifts, my wife was afraid to tell me she had been admitted until my shift ended at 7, because if I left, she knew I would receive a strike. I worked my shift in Brookwood, then drove to the hospital, and then drove back to the mines, back and forth for 3 days in order to be with my family. These unfair labor practices and conditions led the UMWA rank and file membership to strike starting on April 1st, 2021. We are still fighting for a better contract for ourselves, our families, and our communities. We are waiting on Warrior Met, whose largest shareholder is BlackRock, to come to the table and offer a fair contract to those of us whose labor has been used to make them billions. This is why I'm asking that you support the Stop Wall Street Looting Act, which will help to reform private equity industry. This bill would help workers, families, and communities by forcing private investment firms like BlackRock to take responsibility for the actions of the companies they take over. Management at Warrior Met has stated, "We will starve them out, and they aren't worth anything else." The investment firms that own Warrior Met need to be held accountable for these statements and the treatment workers have endured, not only while on strike, but for the past 5 years. While the company I have helped make billions of dollars over the past decade has turned their back on the workers during our strike, the UMWA has provided strike pay and insurance for the miners while on strike. So other unions and other workers across the country have provided solidarity and direct support. The auxiliary, made up with families from the mine workers, has worked tirelessly to bring and support for us to provide food, clothing, baby items, and holiday gifts to striking families. All workers deserve respect in our workplace and fair compensation for our labor. We will continue to fight for the UMWA brothers and sisters, and we will continue to speak out against the exploitation of workers by companies funded by private equity. We will continue to stand up for ourselves, but also for the workers, families, and communities suffering under the same circumstances. I have traveled with the UMWA to New York City to bring the strike to the doorsteps of BlackRock and call on them to take action to support the workers and communities they have invested in. BlackRock, Vanguard, and other private owners have responded in silence. I would like to ask Congress to take action to ensure that workers and families do not continue to be the victims of these private equity firms who do not care if workers are pushed to the limits as long as they're receiving the highest return on investment possible. Thank you for allowing me to be here today and to share the glimpse of why we are striking in Brookwood.
Mr. Wright, thank you very much for being with us.
Honestly, I don't know how you listen to these testimonies and be filled with anything other than totally justified rage. When I listened to these live, I nearly cried during Braxton's testimony because of how he spoke about what the bankruptcy contract did to him and his family. Before he was able to, but before he talked about how most of the partners of coal miners, or many of the partners of the coal miners, did not have to work. They could stay at home and be a caregiver to their children and things like that. Additionally, the coal miners themselves had to work less to make ends meet, and they themselves were able to actually go and be a part of their family. And over the last 5 years, these people have essentially been sponsoring their families, having to work 6 to 7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. I mean, that's what it ultimately is. You're not spending any amount of time with your family. You're basically just sponsoring them. You're going to work, you're waking up, you're going to work, and you're coming home and you're going to sleep so that the rest of your family can live. And that's just not something that we should be having to deal with today. That's not something that workers in Alabama should have to do so that New York hedge fund managers can make millions of dollars a year. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right. But that's not the reaction that Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville had. That's not the reaction that he came to this Senate hearing with. Presented with an opportunity on a national stage to condemn the exploitation of a small Alabama community by international private equity firms, he began his remarks by saying that he felt this was inappropriate. Adam, let's play that clip.
I want to associate myself with the remarks made by Ranking Member Braun. While this is not the first time the chairman has directly involved himself in union dealings in my home state of Alabama, I want to make it clear and on the record, I do not believe the Budget Committee has a jurisdiction over matters involving labor practices across our country. If a hearing like this should take place at all, it should be in front of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, better known as HELP, which I am a member. That being said, I think it is inappropriate for Congress to weigh in on labor disputes.
Can you imagine? You're a politician. You're elected to presumably make people's lives better. Like, what do you mean you think it's inappropriate to weigh in on private negotiations? And of course, this is not a consistently held belief that these politicians have. That has been the response from politician after politician that I have reached out to, asking them to comment on this on the strike. They've said, it's not my place, it's private negotiations, whatever. And the same people will talk about Minnie Mouse wearing a pantsuit instead of wearing a dress. That's happening in a private company. Like, and it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter at all what a mouse wears, what a cartoon mouse wears. It, like, they'll also comment on Dr. Seuss's estate taking down some books that had racist cartoons in it. That's a private company. That's a private institution deciding what to do with its resources. Of course they comment on that. And it's absurd. The only time that they have this stance is when it involves actual material benefits for working people. He then spouted off a couple of misleading facts from Warrior Met's PR people, despite having just said he didn't think Congress ought to weigh in. He just finished saying, I'm playing these chronologically. He said, first, I think it's inappropriate to weigh in. But then he said, basically, well, if I'm going to weigh in at all, it's going to be on the side of the boss. Let's play that clip where he talks about the wages, Adam.
I want to make sure the record accurately reflects the facts and figures of what is being discussed today with Warrior Met Coal, located in Brookwood, Alabama. The jobs at Warrior Met Coal pay an average wage of over $97,000 annually. This is one of the top average wages in the state.
What a ghoul. What a disgusting ghoul. We just finished talking about how he didn't think $200,000 was enough compensation for important special snowflakes like him. We just finished talking about that. What he doesn't say in that clip, but you would know if you heard the testimony, is that these miners worked 6 to 7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day for that $97,000 a year. That's not nearly enough for the kind of work that they do and the kind of hours they spent doing the kind of work that they do. And he has the audacity to literally a single day after he gave his remarks on the stock trading ban, saying that it's not enough of an incentive to get over $200,000 a year from the U.S. taxpayer to do his job. He has the gall to literally less than 24 hours after those statements tell coal miners in Alabama that $97,000 is enough for you for 6 to 10 day week, 6 to 7 day work weeks, 10 to 12 hour days. What a ghoul. Just disgusting. And frankly, he seemed confused about what his purpose as a politician is. Let's play that last clip about where he said what he thought the whole agenda of the hearing was.
So to me, it's clear that the purpose of this hearing is for the majority to push a political agenda.
Yeah, that's politics. That's politics. You're a politician. You weigh in on to push a political agenda.
Every hearing is pushing a political agenda. Every hearing you don't have is also a reflection of a political agenda. It's completely asinine.
And the he wants people to be brain poisoned to think enough to think that things like having a Mr. or Mrs. Potato Head is politics, but people's wages and working conditions are not. And I think that's where the disconnect is, right? I think that's what he's getting at. He's saying, oh, wages, those are decided by the boss. That's not politics. That's just nature. And that's, of course, nonsense.
Yeah, I really think you hit it on the head there. I think that is a good example of how mainstream conservatives view politics. And frankly, a lot of mainstream liberals too, because it's just, the reaction to those reactions.
Yeah.
About various cultural touching points. And the economy is just off the table.
Right. Yeah, the economy is just natural. There are no decisions that people make. You take your crumbs and go. Take your crumbs and go, and we want to talk about real issues like whether or not a cartoon mouse is wearing a skirt.
But in terms of brain poison, I mean, the more I listen to the Senator Tuberville, the more brain poison I'm feeling. Way to go, Tommy.
Insane. Yeah. It's disgusting. What a ghoul. He had the gall after that. To go up to Braxton Wright, Alabama coal miner, and try to shake his hand. Braxton did not shake his hand after that disgusting display, but frankly, he would have been within his right to beat the tar out of him, I think. I think he would have been within his right to beat the tar out of him. And am I saying he should have done that or that it would have been legal? No. But would it have been ethical? Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we would have given to the bail fund. And then guess what? Alabama legislators would have tried to penalize us too. So that's politics for Alabama.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.